Donald Trump to go on November ATHON to Asia. U.S. President Donald Trump is scheduled to go to Asia this November, officially to attend an APEC meeting, but in reality, to go on a hackathon. Multiple sources agree. The hackathon is aimed at getting money to keep the bankrupt U.S. corporate government going beyond the December extension that was given by its mostly Asian creditors. The U.S. corporate government was given enough money to continue operation for 3 months after its September 30th fiscal year-end payment deadline because they were threatened to destroy the planet. Asian secret society sources confirmed during a meeting last week with representatives of the White Dragon Society. In other words, they confirmed that the entire recent North Korean brouhaha is nothing but a major extortion campaign. The White Dragon Society, for its part, recommended that the Asians give the U.S. corporate government a choice for beyond December. Either accept the next payment through Canada in exchange for Canadian-led reform of your political and economic system, or else we will call your bluff and all-out nuclear war. It's a pretty safe bet that the Americans would do if forced to choose between nuclear holocaust and Canadians. In such a scenario, the U.S. military chains of command will remain intact and possibly even taken out the Canadian armed forces as well. In exchange, the Canadians will have control over politics and the economy during a cleanup of sewer that Washington, D.C. has become. Such a move is likely to have public support. American support of the politicians in D.C. is below 10%, while support for the U.S. armed forces is consistently around 70%. By contrast, over 60% of Canadians support their government because, unlike the bribed blackmailed D.C. swamp, it actually works for the people. In any case, the signs of imminent U.S. bankruptcy and collapse are being proliferating day by day, so the ability of U.S. corporate government to keep kicking the can down the road is ending anyway, and some hard choices will have to be made. In California, for example, CalPERS, the largest public pension fund in the U.S. and one of the best managed, is being forced to cut pension payouts by as much as 90%. Meanwhile, the state of Pennsylvania is joining Illinois, Puerto Rico, Detroit, and others in being unable to pay its bills. These events reflect the fact that the petrodollar system that has allowed the U.S. corporate government to live beyond its means for the past 40 years is collapsing. As has been widely noted, China has announced it will be buying oil using gold-backed yuan, thus dealing a death blow to the petrodollar. Now Venezuela, one of the biggest sources of U.S. oil imports, says it will no longer accept payment for oil in U.S. dollars. Another sign of desperation was the U.S. going after Indonesia for a huge 40% import penalty tax on palm oil, a bankrupt nation scrambling for dollars in any way they can to keep afloat. Just remember who came here on the onset and convinced the Indonesian government with huge under-the-table payments to cut down the jungles in the first place, White Dragon Society sources in Indonesia pointed out. In these desperate circumstances, U.S. Secretary of Treasury Steven Mnuchin last week echoed earlier tweets by U.S. President Donald Trump when he threatened to cut China off from accessing the U.S. and international dollar system. Multiple pundits and experts sounded the alarm at these comments, because it is clear that the U.S. would lose any economic war with China, and that trying to cut China off from the dollar system would destroy the dollar, not China. That is because the United States is the most indebted country in the history of the planet, and the cut-off of finance would lead to a drastic drop in U.S. living standards and isolation of the U.S. from the world economy. The Chinese, who prefer harmony to nasty fights, have been giving lip service to U.S. calls to sanctions from North Korea, so as to avoid giving Americans a pretext to take rash actions. However, senior North Korean agents based in Japan say the sanctions are in name only, and that the supply of goods from China and oil from Russia continues to pour into North Korea unabated. The Khazarian Mafia, for its part, is pushing hard for the U.S. cooperative government to accept the Paris Accords as a precondition for further financing. This move is being spearheaded by top Khazarians in the Trump regime, such as the economic advisor Gary Cohn and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. The problem with the Paris Accords, other than the fact that they are based on pseudoscience by private scientists, is that they keep the Khazarian mob in charge of the world financial system. The Paris Accords do give the Chinese a bigger seat at the table, but they humiliate India and Japan and keep overall Khazarian control intact. At this point, we need to take a close look at the connection between the Vatican, the P2 Freemason Lodge, and the Khazarian Mafia to understand what is really going on in this planet. David Rockefeller and members of the British royal family, as well as members of the Rothschild family, all point to the P2 Lodge, the would-be creators of a fascist world Roman dictatorship, as both the real controllers of the US dollar system and the source of most of the world's terrorism. Top Khazarian mob leaders like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu work for them, the sources say. In Japan, this writer has systematically documented how the P2 Lodge, then headed by top Jesuit Peter Hans Coffin-Patch, was behind the March 11, 2011 nuclear and tsunami mass murder attack against Japan. Now, Asian Secret Society and top Japanese gangster sources both confirm that since the Fukushima terror incident, truckloads of Japanese 10,000 yen bills have been shipped to Fukushima. There, the money is recycled to politicians and gangsters. In other words, Fukushima is being used as an excuse to launder radioactive money, not radioactivity. Former Japanese Finance Minister Heizo Takenaka is still one of the top Khazarian subcontractors distributing this Fukushima terror money, Japanese gangster sources confirmed. Pentagon sources say the war against the cabal in Japan will escalate after the removal of Pacific Commander Admiral Harry Harris due this year-end. In the meantime, though, Japanese security policy sources say that Khazarian slave Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is being informed in advance of North Korean missile launches and is given a script to read in response. This raid is being carried out not only to extort money with the threat of nuclear war, but also to create a plausible excuse to ramp up the widely despised Abe's fake opinion poll support, the sources say. If Pope Francis really is sincere about reforming the Vatican and the P2, he needs to come clean about the Fukushima and reveal the documented involvement of Coffin-Patch and his henchman Netanyahu. Netanyahu's unprecedented trip last week to Colombia, Argentina, and Mexico would do little to stop the war on Mozart and the war on drugs by the Southern Command, which was and perhaps still is led by General John Kelly, who now runs the White House. Pentagon sources pointed out Netanyahu's trip prompted U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis and Northern Command's General Lloyd Robinson to visit the Mexican military leaders in Mexico City September 11 after Bibi Netanyahu left to take down the Mexican drug cartels, Pentagon sources say. The Mexican 8.1 quake may have been a cabal attempt to force Mexico to stop aid to Hurricane Harvey victims, the sources add. Netanyahu may have also been seeking a place for political asylum, because he knows the real Jews in Israel are waking up to the fact he's a Satan-worshipping pseudo-Jew and are preparing to put him in jail where he belongs. The Israelis are being forced to deal with their satanic leadership because their Daesh mercenary army is being thoroughly defeated by a de facto alliance between the U.S. military, Iran, Russia, and Turkey. Even the Mossad-linked Dakar website acknowledges this reality by reporting U.S. and Russia pincer attack against Daesh. The tectonic shift in the old power balance in the Middle East was underlined by Turkey, which was the second largest NATO army, announced last week it was buying Russia $400,000 anti-aircraft missiles. The Pentagon sources also say that the speeches on the September 11 anniversary of 11 September by Trump, Mattis, Dunford, and others promise actions against terrorists while refusing to name Saudi or Islamic terrorism as perpetrators. Taken together with the purge last week of 16 top Saudi officials, this may well mean that Saudi Arabia's new King Salman is cutting off his nation's secret alliance with Israel in order to maintain the U.S. military support his regime needs to survive. This means Israel too much purge its satanic leadership if it is to survive. The tectonic plate shifts in the world's power structure that now taking place are so huge that humanity may be liberated this autumn.